It's that time of year, the time in which we're all concerned about time, how time flies and things change as we ring in the new year and say goodbye to past times. Which obviously, given my Silent Hill obsessed mind, got me to thinking about how time works in Silent Hill. That is, how does time work in Silent Hill? Does it really exist at all? And how many times am I going to say the word time in this video? Many, many, many times. Let's celebrate 2019 by starting off with a new Silent Hill video all about how time affects the town. To begin, the passage of time. By this, I mean the minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour, literal passage of time, the way that it slowly passes us by, and as it passes, we and the world around us change. This is the time we feel most personally. It's what makes us feel hungry, tired, ill, what makes us age, and ultimately die. For all intents and purposes, the passage of time does not exist inside Silent Hill. Characters are shown traveling in the town for hours, if not days or weeks, with no need for food, water, or sleep. Characters who are trapped in the town for long periods don't seem to age or change. We never see anyone with scraggly beards or worn-away clothes. Only once are any of the characters seen eating, while other characters often mention not being hungry at multiple points in the series. And yet, even though none of these things happen, there is one thing that does happen that requires the passage of time: healing injuries. Think about when characters are hurt in the game. In Silent Hill 2, James survives being pushed off the roof of Brookhaven, tumbling down through the ceiling into the second floor. Maria is killed often, but always comes back. In Silent Hill, death and injury are not permanent. The characters either recover off-screen, or the player uses an item that miraculously reinvigorates the character in no time flat. What heals injuries? Ultimately, it is the passage of time, allowing your body the time it needs to recover. Rest and nourishment are important, but all of these are dependent upon time passing. But Silent Hill doesn't allow for the passage of time. Here is my first idea about how time works in Silent Hill. The town has the power to manipulate who and what experiences the passage of time, how long and how much. The characters' bodies are put in a kind of stasis, where the effects of time on their physical well-being don't seem to happen. But when they are hurt, that can be circumvented in a way that allows them to heal at a marvelous rate. Of course, these are aspects of the story that are influenced by gameplay. It would hardly be fun to wait hours for a wound to heal, nor would it be entertaining to have to stop at the Happy Burger to get lunch. But the effect it has is this feeling that the town has the power to make time influence you in any way it wants. That theoretically, the town could simply age you to death, or starve you beyond reason, simply by increasing the amount of time your body experiences. What it does do, making it so time passes only in the most life-threatening circumstances, makes it so the characters can focus on the goals that brought them to the town, rather than the mundane trivialities of everyday life. The first time the Otherworld appears in Silent Hill is when the two halves of Alessa's soul come together in the first game. Effectively, the vision of the town as we know it is created during that game. What does this mean for the town itself? If the town is in a completely separate alternate dimension, created and inspired solely by Alessa Gillespie's experiences, then we would imagine the town would reflect her idea of Silent Hill, the way she experienced it, forever. But that's not what happens. From game to game, we can see the passage of time and the changing of time periods, including events and historical periods that Alessa would have had no part of. Silent Hill doesn't seem to be stuck in time. In Silent Hill 2, James visits the Lakeview Hotel. At first, it appears just as it had when he visited sometime in 1990. After he remembers what happened to Mary, the building appears as it did after it burned down a few years later. Here, the town manipulates the passage of time, changing the building to reflect different time periods even as James is exploring it. Another example is Toluca Prison in the same game. The prison James visits no longer exists in modern-day Silent Hill. It was destroyed sometime in the 1800s. But there it is, under the Historical Society. Later, it vanishes. The town, apparently, can not only manipulate the passage of time backwards and forwards on a single person to influence the effect it has on their bodies, but it can also do it to specific buildings. It can also do it to different buildings in different ways, so that the town can exist in the 1990s and the 1800s simultaneously. But does the town as a whole experience the passage of time in the real world? The best clue for this is the appearance of new technology in Silent Hill. In Silent Hill 2, James finds typewriters throughout Brookhaven Hospital. It's the early 90s. Computers really aren't popular yet. There's a spot on the first floor in an office where James can save, and nearby is a typewriter. In Silent Hill 3, Heather visits that same hospital and she saves in that same room. And right where the typewriter had been, when James was there in 1993, there's a computer. So Silent Hill can manipulate time, but it also experiences the time too. That may sound confusing, so let me explain. The town has control over the effects time has. It can make a building revert to how it looked 100 years ago, or it can keep a person from aging. But the actual, literal area of Silent Hill, the region, still experiences the shift of modern time. A small pocket of town might be stuck in the year 1800, but the town as a whole moves forward. The general buildings and streets in town seem to change to reflect the changes in the real time period, which seems to hint at the idea that Silent Hill is not a completely separate dimension, but instead a mirror dimension, which reflects a twisted version of the real town even as it changes over time. It can go back and forth and reflect things which happened in the past, and thus parts of Silent Hill can appear to be from different time periods, but the town as a whole still exists within the modern year. The last thing I want to bring up is the difference between reality and Silent Hill, between the world outside the town and the world within it. As I've said, they must be connected on some level because the town changes to reflect the passing of time as it actually happens in reality. But does time pass evenly between them? A few of the characters appear to enter and leave town without any time having passed at all. The world outside is as they left it, and they haven't aged. Does this mean that time is completely frozen in town? The best clue in reference to this is Henry Townshend. In Silent Hill 4, Henry is trapped in his room, which is slowly becoming part of Silent Hill. While it is really part of Walter's other worlds, he's using powers akin to the town's to create similar effects. It appears as if time does not pass. Henry does not need food or rest. But Henry can see into the real world. At the beginning of the game, he says he's been trapped in the room for about a week. As the game continues, he sees time passing outside him. The sun rises and sets outside his window. People walk around the apartments, living their lives, and Henry can watch them do it. He can see time affecting them, even as he is frozen and unchanging. There is some fluidity here. Eileen enters the hospital about halfway through the game, and Henry spends what must be at least a few more days exploring the rest of the other worlds. Eileen is most likely only in the real-world hospital for a few hours while this is happening. Given the severity of her injuries, her death and the bad ending must happen rather quickly, so I would assume that time in the other worlds is passing slower than time in the real world. They see the real world passing them by in Henry's windows, but in the Silent Hill's otherworld, they experience a much longer day. Another example would be Shepherd's Glen. When the pact with God fails in 2003, it takes 4 more years for the town to truly fall apart. At this time, people begin vanishing, and others begin to realize time has ceased to exist for them. Officer Wheeler barricades himself in his office months before Alex enters town. Elle comments her house has no food at all, but she is still alive. By 2007, supplies have vanished and people are still surviving, clearly having entered the manipulated time of Silent Hill. This is in part represented by the fact that every clock in town is stuck on the same time. The passage of time has occurred, but their bodies haven't been experiencing it. The town and the people in it are frozen, but time itself continues on. This can be seen in how Alex has clearly changed while he was out of town for 4 years, while everyone in town appears to have remained the same. To summarize, Silent Hill does not exist outside of time. It experiences the passage of time, but it can manipulate how that passage affects the people and places within its domain. It can manipulate them forwards or backwards through time. It can freeze people so they can survive without basic necessities, and also unfreeze them so their bodies can heal from injuries. The passage of time between the real world and Silent Hill does not seem to be quite even. The town appears to have a larger ratio of hours to a single real hour, so that people in the town experience more time than people outside it.